She stepped outside with her coffee and froze. The bridge, their only road to the world, was gone. The air smelled of wet earth and concrete dust, a strange mix of life and suffocation. Low fog drifted above the valley, wrapping apple trees in pale silver ribbons. Birds called once, twice, then fell silent, as if even nature was holding its breath. Marcus Kellerman stood beside his wife, Sarah, halfway down the gravel lane that led from their porch to the creek. The same lane his father had walked every morning of his life. At the bottom of that hill, where the lane should have crossed the water, heavy slabs of gray concrete now blocked the way. Fresh, bright, deliberate. Sarah whispered, almost to herself, "It's blocked." Marcus didn't move. His jaw tightened. The veins in his neck stood out. He didn't need a sign to know who had done it. For 60 years, that bridge had carried everything the Kellermans cared about: deliveries, school runs, hospital trips, harvest loads, Sunday visits to church. It wasn't just stone and steel. It was connection, freedom, and legacy. Now it looked like a tombstone. Marcus Kellerman didn't know it yet, but this would be the morning that changed everything. The moment a quiet farmer became the center of a war he never asked for. Behind them, the old farmhouse glowed pale gold in the early sun, white clapboards cracked by decades of weather, a porch swing that moved when the wind sighed. Inside, 78-year-old Dorothy Kellerman waited by the kitchen window, dialysis bag ready on the counter, trusting that her son would drive her across that bridge like he always did. She had no idea she was already trapped. Marcus pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. Road closed, authorized vehicles only. The paint was still drying. He zoomed in on the wet footprints around the barricade. Construction boots, size large, the kind used by Prestige Valley Estates crews. Sarah's voice broke through the stillness. "This isn't an accident, is it?" "No," Marcus said. "It's them." Up on the ridge, the new neighborhood gleamed. Rows of McMansions with mirrored windows and trimmed hedges that looked more like museum exhibits than homes. A white Tesla rolled past the gates, sunlight flashing across its hood like a wink. Vivian Ashworth lived up there, HOA president, retired pharmaceutical executive, the self-appointed queen of Prestige Valley. 2 years ago, she had introduced herself to Marcus with manicured charm and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Since then, that smile had become a weapon. The letters had started politely. Concerns about odors, noise, and property value. But polite words can hide sharp blades. First came certified mail, then legal warnings, then a demand to clarify road access rights. Marcus had ignored most of them. He was busy running a farm, not fighting politics. He didn't realize he was feeding a monster that thrived on silence. Now, standing before the barricade, he understood. This wasn't maintenance. It was siege. Sarah placed her hand on his arm. "Mom's dialysis is in an hour." "I'll find another way," he said, though he knew there wasn't one. The alternative road was 8 miles of muddy backtrail, washed out by last night's storm. Even his tractor would struggle through it, let alone an ambulance. A distant engine rumbled from across the creek, a dump truck pulling away. Marcus lifted his phone. Recording. The lens caught the tailgate logo, Prestige Valley Construction, LLC. Proof. Not enough for court, but enough to know he wasn't imagining the enemy. Emma Kellerman, 16, stepped out onto the porch in her soccer jersey, hair tied in a loose braid. She saw her parents standing like statues. "What's going on?" she called. Neither answered. She followed their gaze and her smile vanished. The girl dropped her backpack and ran down the path, sneakers splashing through puddles. She stopped beside her father and stared at the concrete wall. "They can't just do this, right? They can't." Marcus looked at her, remembering when she used to toss apple blossoms into the creek and watch them drift under the bridge. They already did. Sometimes tyranny doesn't arrive with sirens or soldiers. Sometimes it comes quietly, with paperwork and polite signatures. The morning stretched on. Neighbors drove by on the far side, slowing to look, then hurrying away. No one stopped. The Kellermans were invisible now, cut off by concrete and cowardice. Back at the house, Dorothy's voice trembled over the phone. "Marcus, why aren't we leaving yet?" "Bridge is closed, Ma." "Closed?" "Yeah, for now." He didn't tell her that for now could mean forever. The smell of coffee had turned bitter in Sarah's hands. She set the mug on the fence post and stared at the barricade until her eyes filled. "Why us?" she whispered. "Because we don't belong in their brochure." The wind shifted, carrying faint laughter from the ridge. Construction workers finishing the job, oblivious to the damage they'd done. Dorothy's dialysis appointment passed. Emma missed school. And Marcus felt something he hadn't felt since his father's funeral: helplessness. He walked to the bridge edge and kicked a chunk of gravel into the creek. The splash sounded small, almost embarrassed. Every story has a moment when a man decides he's had enough. For Marcus Kellerman, that moment was now. He turned back toward the house, already forming a plan he didn't yet understand. He would call the county. He would find the records. He would learn every law these people twisted. If they wanted a war, they had just declared it. The morning light had turned harsh by the time Marcus reached his porch. Diesel fumes still drifted through the orchard, mixing with the sweetness of apple blossoms. He stood there for a long moment, hands braced on the railing, watching the mist burn off the creek. In the distance, the gray wall gleamed like a scar. The phone on the kitchen counter wouldn't stop buzzing. County numbers, block numbers, voicemail pings. Sarah hovered near the window, listening to Dorothy's dialysis machine hum like a mechanical heartbeat. The sound filled the house with a low, nervous rhythm. Marcus finally picked up the receiver and dialed the County Works Department. A bored voice answered. "Millbrook Infrastructure Division. This is Marcus Kellerman. Someone sealed off Millbrook Bridge. That's my only access road." There was a pause, the sound of paper shuffling. "According to the order, sir, emergency structure repairs are underway. You'll need to coordinate with your homeowners association." Marcus's stomach dropped. "I'm not part of AHOA. Says here you're within the shared easement zone. All requests go through the association." Click. The line went dead. He set the phone down slowly. "They've got paperwork," he said. Sarah's eyes widened. "Vivian!" "Who else?" Bureaucracy is a perfect weapon. It doesn't bleed, and it never admits guilt. That afternoon a white envelope appeared in their mailbox. No postage, just slid inside. The logo at the top read Millbrook Lane Homeowners Association. Marcus slid it open with the tip of his pocket knife. Inside lay a letter thick with legal perfume. "Dear Mr. Kellerman, due to structural concerns and safety liabilities, Millbrook Bridge is temporarily closed to non-authorized vehicles. Please provide proof of legal easement within 21 days to avoid permanent access termination." Sarah read over his shoulder. 21 days? They can't just. "They already have," Marcus said. He could almost hear Vivian's voice behind the printed words. Smooth, patronizing, the way she'd set community standards at the last neighborhood meeting, as if community meant everyone except the Kellermans. That evening, headlights glowed at the top of the ridge. A white Tesla rolled down the hill, gravel whispering under its tires. It stopped just short of the barricade. Vivian Ashworth stepped out, dressed in tennis whites as though she'd come from a match instead of a sabotage. Her blonde hair caught the dying sun. Her smile was polite poison. "Marcus," she called across the creek, cupping a manicured hand to her mouth. "So sorry for the inconvenience. The engineers insisted we close the bridge for everyone's safety." Marcus didn't answer. He simply raised his phone and took a picture. Vivian's smile faltered for half a heartbeat before snapping back into place. "I'm sure once you provide your access documents, we'll have this all sorted. You understand, right? Liability." She said the last word like it was a disease he carried. Some wars begin with bullets. Others begin with smiles and paperwork. Vivian turned, slid back into her car, and the Tesla purred away up the hill, leaving only dust and the faint echo of laughter from her Bluetooth headset. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with old deed folders spread before him, the yellowed pages smelling of dust and history. His grandfather's handwriting ran across them in blue ink, easement boundaries, signatures from 1962, the deal that built the bridge. Somewhere in these papers was a truth, buried under 60 years of neglect. At 2 a.m., the farmhouse creaked with the settling of old wood. Outside, security lights from the ridge glared across the valley like search beams. Sarah dozed on the couch, and Emma's bedroom light flickered from her phone screen. Marcus stared out the window of that concrete wall. and thought about what it meant to cage a family without ever setting foot on their land. Power doesn't always need violence. Sometimes all it takes is isolation. 2 days later, an SUV from Blackstone and Associates, the HOA's law firm, rolled up to the far side of the creek. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, looked across the water, and began taking photos of the farm with long-range lenses. They didn't shout, didn't threaten. They just documented, like hunters studying prey before the shot. Marcus filmed them back. The camera shook slightly in his hands, but his voice was steady. "Get used to this view," he muttered, "'cause it's the last time you'll see it for free." The men ignored him, returned to their SUV, and drove away. That afternoon, the first anonymous complaint arrived at the county office. Excessive tractor noise, chemical odors, potential environmental hazard. Within hours, Marcus received emails from inspectors scheduling visits. It was an avalanche disguised as paperwork. Sarah slammed her palm on the kitchen counter. "They are trying to bury us in fines." "They are trying to break us," Marcus replied. "But they picked the wrong farm." He began setting up trail cameras along the fence line, small, silent watchers hidden in apple trees. If they wanted evidence, he'd give them evidence. Every attack teaches a victim something about the attacker. Marcus was learning fast. 3 nights later, headlights flashed again near the barricade. This time it wasn't Vivian's Tesla, but a black pickup, engine idling. A man stepped out, walked to the concrete wall, and spray-painted a crude message across the sign. "Sell and leave." Marcus caught it all on camera. The next morning, he emailed the footage to a lawyer named Janet Reeves, the only attorney in the county known for standing up to HOAs. Her reply came before noon. "Keep recording everything. Don't engage. We'll build the case brick by brick." For the first time since the blockade, Marcus felt a sliver of control return. But control is fragile. That evening, when he went to feed the chickens, he found one of his fence posts sawed halfway through. Another warning, this time carved into wood. The wind carried the faint hum of distant tennis music from Vivian's property. It sounded like mockery. Sarah came out onto the porch. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough to start fighting back." He looked toward the ridge. Somewhere behind those perfect lawns and security cameras, people were planning how to erase his family's name from this valley. What they didn't understand was that Marcus Kellerman had deep roots, older than their mortgages, stronger than their money. They'd poured concrete over his bridge, but they had just built the foundation of their own downfall. The camera of his trail cam blinked once in the dark, recording the moment his resolve hardened. From now on, every lie would have a timestamp, every threat, a face. And somewhere up the hill, Vivian Ashworth was dialing her lawyer, convinced that one stubborn farmer couldn't possibly stand against her world of wealth and influence. She had no idea she'd just created her greatest enemy. Rain came 2 nights after the barricade, thin, cold, persistent. It tapped against the farmhouse windows like a reminder that time was running out. Marcus watched rivulets crawl down the glass and felt the same slow pressure building inside him. He drove the tractor halfway to town before the mud forced him to stop. The county records office sat 8 miles beyond the ridge, a box of brick and flickering fluorescent lights. Inside, the air smelled of paper, dust, and the faint metallic tang of the copy machines. A clerk looked up as he entered, surprise flickering across her face at the sight of a farmer dripping rainwater onto government linoleum. "Research or filing?" she asked. "Research," Marcus replied. "Millbrook Bridge. I need everything on the original easement." She pointed him toward a row of gray cabinets. "Bottom drawer, Section D, old stuff." The drawers groaned open like old men waking from a nap. Inside lay 60 years of forgotten promises, maps folded into brittle squares, deeds typed on yellow carbon paper, signatures fading like ghosts. Marcus traced his finger along one line. Kellerman Farm, perpetual vehicular access for agricultural and residential use. There it was, the proof. His grandfather's name in blue fountain pen ink, steady and certain. He copied the page, slipped it into a plastic sleeve, and kept digging. Something in the back of the drawer caught his eye, a newer folder stamp with the HOA's logo. Inside were invoices labeled emergency infrastructure upgrades. Same project code repeated twice, same amounts billed to different accounts. "Double billing," Marcus muttered. "You thieves." He photographed every page with trembling hands. By the time he left, the rain had turned to sleet. The courthouse clock struck noon as he stepped outside, the sound echoing like a countdown. Back at the farm, Sarah and Emma were sorting spoiled vegetables for compost. The blockade had killed deliveries. Contracts were already canceling. Sarah looked up as Marcus burst through the door, soaked but smiling for the first time in weeks. "Found it," he said, spreading the documents across the kitchen table. "They can't take the bridge. It's written right here." She studied the papers, hope flickering like a candle. Will it matter? It will if the right person reads it. He scanned everything into his laptop and emailed the files to Janet Reeves, the attorney who had promised to help. Her reply came an hour later. "This is solid. They violated the original easement and committed financial fraud. I'm filing a motion tomorrow." Marcus leaned back, exhaustion washing over him. For the first time, the fight felt winnable. But victories in battles like this never come quietly. When power is threatened, it always strikes back. That evening, a county truck stopped at the far side of the barricade. A man in a reflective vest waved a clipboard. "Inspection notice," he shouted across the creek. "Inspection of what?" Marcus called back. "Potential environmental violations. Complaint filed this morning." Marcus stared at him, realization settling like ice. Someone had already read the countermove and sent another attack. Behind the inspector, a white Tesla waited on the ridge, headlights glowing through the mist. Vivian Ashworth sat inside, phone pressed to her ear, watching. He turned to Sarah. "She knows. About the records. Everything." The inspector left a paper nailed to the barricade. Unauthorized agricultural operations. Immediate compliance required. The words bled in the drizzle, red ink running down the page like fresh wounds. Evidence can expose corruption, but it can also paint a target on the one who holds it. That night the valley felt different. Too quiet. Even the frogs had gone still. Marcus sat by the window with a flashlight, documents spread across his lap. Outside, headlights appeared briefly near the orchard, then vanished. Maybe just a neighbor. Maybe not. He whispered to himself. They think they can scare me. His hand closed around the camera remote, checking battery lights one by one. Every lens along the fence line blinked green. He felt a strange calm settle over him. Fear had burned away, leaving purpose. At dawn, he drove to town again, this time not to hide but to deliver. Janet Reeves met him on the courthouse steps, coat collar turned up against the wind. She flipped through the photocopies, nodding slowly. "This is enough to open a case," she said. "But once we file, they'll come for you harder. Are you ready for that?" Marcus looked past her at the gray sky. "They already came. Now it's my turn." The paper in Janet's hands wasn't just proof, it was a spark. By the time the ink dried on her motion, a fire had begun to spread through the holes of Prestige Valley Estates. And Vivian Ashworth was about to discover that the quiet farmer she tried to crush had just become the most dangerous man in her world. The storm began, not with thunder, but with phone calls. By Monday morning, the Kellerman's line was ringing nonstop. County inspectors, zoning officers, even an environmental surveyor demanding access to suspected hazardous storage. Marcus listened to the rehearsed bureaucratic tones, each one reciting the same script. The script had a name, Vivian Ashworth. When power is challenged, it doesn't shout. It whispers into phones. It drafts letters. It multiplies paperwork until truth drowns in it. The first inspection arrived before sunrise. 2 SUVs, orange vests, clipboards, and cameras. They measured barrels, photographed fertilizer bags, and murmured about compliance with Section 47B. One of them slipped a business card into Sarah's hand and said softly, "You should consider selling. People up there want peace and quiet." By midday, the farm's email inbox filled with spam complaints, odors, light pollution, tractor noise, animal cruelty. Sarah deleted them one by one, tears of frustration streaking the dust on her cheeks. Marcus kept his focus on the real war. Janet Reeves had filed the case. The county clerk's stamp was still drying when Vivian made her next move. That afternoon, Marcus saw her again, standing at the far end of the barricade with 3 men in suits. They spoke in low voices, pointing toward the farmhouse. One man took photos, another unfolded blueprints. Vivian noticed Marcus watching and gave a small, practice wave, like a politician greeting voters. "Trespassing's a crime." Marcus shouted across the creek. She smiled. "Only if it's your land, day." Her voice carried perfectly through the still air. The men laughed politely, folded their papers, and walked away. Humiliation can be more corrosive than fear. That afternoon, it burned through Marcus like acid. He spent the rest of the day tightening fences, checking cameras, stacking copies of every document into labeled folders. The neatness calmed him, proof that order still existed somewhere. That night, headlights flashed again on the ridge. A drone whirred above the orchard, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. Marcus grabbed his rifle, hesitated, then lowered it. Instead, he filmed the drone until it vanished into the fog. The next morning, photos of his property appeared on the HOA's community safety page, captioned "unregistered agricultural equipment and potential environmental hazards." Sarah slammed the laptop shut. "They are turning the neighbors against us." "Then we show them who we are," Marcus said. "No more hiding." He drove to town with a crate of apples. Sweet? Perfect. The last harvest before the blockade had ruined distribution. He parked outside the diner, handed them out to anyone who'd take one, and told the story. How the bridge was sealed, how the HOA had trespassed, how one family had been cut off from the world. By evening, the story had spread faster than Vivian's lawyers could contain it. Local reporters called. The county Facebook page lit up with comments. Some believed him, others didn't. But silence was broken, and that was enough. The first rule of control is isolation. The first crack in control is exposure. Vivian felt the crack widening. At Prestia Valley's clubhouse, she poured herself a second glass of wine and watched the news segment replay on her phone. Marcus's face filled the screen. Tired, Mud Street, defiant. The caption read "Local farmer battles HOA over bridge blockade." Her smile thinned. "If he wants a fight," she murmured, "I'll give him paperwork for breakfast." Within hours, her lawyers filed a counterclaim. Public nuisance and environmental hazard. The county sheriff delivered the notice personally, leaving it on the porch like a dead thing. Sarah picked it up with shaking hands. "How can they sue us for existing?" Marcus looked at the papers. "They can't win, but they can make us tired." He called Janet again. She sounded calm, almost too calm. "This is what bullies do, Marcus. They escalate. Keep your record safe. Every photo, every call. And don't let them see you flinch." That night the wind rose. Rain hammered the metal roof. Somewhere in the darkness, the drone returned, its faint buzz circling the house. Emma woke from a nightmare and crept into her parents' room. "They are watching us," she whispered. Marcus pulled her close. "Let them watch. We'll give them something worth seeing." He stayed by the window until dawn, the glow of the barricade's warning lights blinking through the rain. Vivian Ashworth believed she was tightening the noose. What she didn't know was that every thread of that rope was being recorded, dated, and documented, ready to hang her own empire when the time came. The storm eased just as the first light crept over the ridge. The valley steamed, pale and ghostly. Marcus stepped outside, mud sucking at his boots, and breathed in the smell of wet earth and diesel. He looked at the bridge, at the barricade, and then at the orchard beyond it. "You wanted a war," he said softly. "Now you've got one." The camera on the porch clicked once, catching the moment, a still frame of a man staring down the concrete wall that tried to erase him. Every war is a moment when it stops being about land or money, and starts being about survival. The Kellermans had reached that point. A week after the attempted arson, the valley seemed quieter, but only on the surface. The fog lay heavy in the mornings, muffling sound, turning the creek into a silver ghost between the trees. Inside the farmhouse, every creak of wood and whisper of wind made someone flinch. Dorothy sat by the window, knitting with trembling hands. The dialysis machine hummed softly beside her, its rhythm matching the old clock on the wall. Sarah moved through the kitchen like a shadow, cleaning dishes that were already clean. Marcus checked each window latch twice before breakfast. Emma avoided looking outside at all. "They haven't come back," Sarah told herself. "Not yet. But fear doesn't need footsteps to stay alive. It just needs imagination." That Monday, Marcus found 3 envelopes nailed to the barricade. Times 1 from the county zoning department. Times 1 from an environmental health office he'd never heard of. Times and 1 embossed with the Prestige Valley Estates logo, Vivian Ashworth seal. Each letter was a new blade. Violation notices, warnings, fines, all written with professional politeness, all designed to bleed him slowly. Marcus spread them across the table. The paper smelled faintly of printer ink and arrogance. "They are choking us with documents," he said. "We can't pay all this," Sarah whispered. "That's the point." He took photos of every page and sent them to Janet Reeves. Her reply came quickly. "Hold steady. We'll counter every claim. Don't talk to inspectors without me." But the inspectors didn't wait for invitations. The next morning, 2 white SUVs rolled up to the far side of the barricade. Men in reflective vests shouted across the creek, demanding entry for public safety checks. Marcus refused, quoting his legal rights from Janet's notes. The men left, slowly, angrily. One of them photographed the house before driving away. That night, the Kellerman's internet slowed to a crawl. Their email server was flooded with spam complaints. Someone had posted their address online under the headline, "Toxic Farm Endangering Prestige Valley Residents." Sarah unplugged the modem and stared at the blinking light as if it were a fuse ready to blow. Up on the ridge, Vivian Ashworth hosted a dinner party. Crystal glasses, white candles, laughter too sharp to be kind. Her guests were board members, lawyers, a county commissioner. On the table lay the day's newspaper, front page. Farmer accuses HOA of harassment. Vivian tapped the headline with one manicured finger. "Public sympathy fades fast," she said. "By next month he'll be a footnote." Her lawyer smirked. "And the easement claim?" "Stalled. I made sure the records office misplaced the copies. By the time they are found, our construction permit will be permanent." Glasses clinked. Laughter rose. In the distance, lightning flashed over the valley, silent from where they sat today. While they toasted their success, the family below counted the hours of sleep they no longer had. Emma woke one night to the sound of her phone buzzing. A new message, unknown number. "Nice house. Pretty orchard. Careful with matches." She froze. The typing bubbles appeared again, then vanished. She ran to her father's room, phone shaking in her hand. Marcus read the text twice. His face stayed calm, but his knuckles went white. "We'll change numbers," Sarah said. "No," Marcus answered. "We'll change tactics." He called Janet at 3 a.m. Her sleepy voice turned sharp when she heard. "Keep the message. Forward it. We can subpoena the carrier. This is criminal now." For the first time, the word criminal sounded like hope. 2 days later, a black sedan pulled up by the barricade. A young reporter stepped out, Lila Martins, from the State Investigative Bureau. Rain spotted her notebook as she called across the creek. "Mr. Kellerman, I'm doing a story on property rights abuse. Can we talk?" Marcus met her halfway down the embankment. He told her everything. The bridge, the lawsuits, the threats. She listened, eyes bright with quiet fury, scribbling faster than the rain could smudge her ink. "Do you have proof?" she asked. "Enough to fill a courtroom." "Then let's make it public." That night, for the first time in months, the Kellermans sat together and watched something on TV that gave them courage, a news teaser. Tomorrow at 9 p.m., concrete, corruption, and control, the bridge that vanished. Vivian saw it too, her wine glass cracked in her hand. The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of engines again. But this time they weren't county trucks, they were tow trucks, parked just beyond the barricade, ready to seize unregistered vehicles. His tractor, his pickup, he ran down the path, shouting. The men ignored him until he held up his phone, filming. Only then did they hesitate. One muttered, "Call her." Marcus recorded every word. Power feeds on silence. Exposure starves it. For the first time, Vivian's empire felt the hunger. But exposure comes with a cost. That evening, someone slashed the orchard's irrigation lines. Thousands of gallons of water bled into the soil before Marcus discovered it. The apple trees, mid-blossom, drooped in the heat. Sarah found him kneeling in the mud streaking his face like war paint. They'll never stop, she whispered. Then neither will we. 3 nights later, Dorothy collapsed during dialysis. The clinic couldn't reach them. The bridge was still sealed. Marcus carried her to the truck, but the date road had turned to a swamp from broken irrigation. The tires sank, spinning. He shouted for help into the dock, but only rain answered. By the time an ambulance reached the far side of the barricade, Dorothy's pulse was fading. Paramedics ran the rest of the way on foot. She survived, but barely. News crews caught footage of the ambulance wading through knee-deep mud, red lights reflecting on the concrete blockade. The clip went viral. Bridge blocked by HOA endangers elderly patient. Vivian's lawyer called her in a panic. We're losing control of the narrative. Then we take control back, she hissed. Dig into his past. Find something. They found nothing criminal, only debt from farm repairs, late taxes, old machinery loans. But they spun it anyway. A smear article appeared online. Local farmer facing foreclosure stage drama for attention. Lila Martins countered within hours, releasing her full investigative piece. The bridge that vanished inside the HOA wall. It included documents, maps, Vivian's duplicate invoices, and Marcus's footage of the arson attempt. The story exploded statewide. Journalists camped outside the ridge gates. Vivian canceled her next HOA meeting. Her phone buzzed with calls she didn't answer. The polished world she'd built began to crack. The next day, Marcus found a handwritten note in his mailbox. No stamp, no signature. Just 6 words. You should have sold when you could. He read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it in the same folder as the deeds and invoices. Every threat is evidence, he told Sarah. That night, he sat alone on the porch. The orchard was silent except for the creak of wet branches. He thought of his grandfather building the bridge stone by stone, of his mother humming softly inside, of his daughter trying to sleep through fear. Sometimes justice isn't about winning, it's about outlasting. And Marcus Kellerman had no intention of losing. He looked at the barricade glowing in the moonlight and whispered, "You wanted a war. You'll get the truth instead." The morning after the news broke, the valley stopped pretending to be quiet. Reporters came first, then lawyers, then the letters. Envelopes arrived by the dozen, thick, white, official. Each carried a different seal but the same purpose: pressure, summons to appear, requests for documentation, notices of violation. Marcus spread them across the kitchen table until the wood disappeared beneath paper. Sarah stood beside him, reading the bold headings through a haze of disbelief. How many lawsuits can one person file? As many as they can afford, Marcus said. The war had shifted from mud and diesel to fonts and signatures, but the damage was the same. Dorothy listened from her chair by the window, hands folded in her lap. Your father used to say, when they stop talking to you and start writing about you, you've scared them, she murmured. Marcus almost smiled. Then I must be terrifying. At Janet Reeves's office downtown, fluorescent lights buzz over stacks of files labeled Prestige Valley Estates versus Kellerman. Janet paced as Marcus and Lila Martins watched from across her desk. She spoke like a soldier planning artillery fire. They are trying to bury us in filings, so we'll answer with one motion: fraud, harassment, malicious prosecution. Every duplicate invoice you found, every fake inspection, we turn it into ammunition. She looked up. Marcus, are you ready for depositions, subpoenas, cameras, all of it? I was born ready to dig, he said. Janet's mouth quirked. Good, because we're going to dig them up. That afternoon she filed a motion in county court. The clerk stamped it, and the sound echoed like a gavel through the small room. Up on the ridge, Vivian Ashworth read the filing over breakfast. The lawyer across from her, a thin man with polished nails, chose his words carefully. It names you personally. Of course it does, she said, slicing into her grapefruit. He wants a villain. It also includes financial fraud. Then make sure the county hears a louder story. By sunset, press releases flooded inboxes across the state. HOA defends environmental safety against unlicensed farm. Professional, polite, poisonous. That night Vivian stood on her balcony, looking down at the valley. The bridge lights flickered. Let him come, she whispered. I built this world. He just lives beneath it. 2 weeks later, Marcus walked into the courthouse wearing his father's old jacket and a determination that weighed more than armor. Cameras flashed. Lila Martin stood by the entrance, notebook ready. Inside, the courtroom smelled of coffee and paper dust. Vivian sat at the defense table, every hair in place, every smile calculated. When Marcus entered, she turned just enough to let him see the confidence in her eyes. Power performs best under fluorescent lights. It believes the stage belongs to it, until someone refuses to play along. Janet opened first. Your Honor, this case isn't about property. It's about abuse of authority, the kind that hides behind bylaws and bank accounts. Vivian's lawyer objected before she finished her second sentence. The judge waved him off. Let her talk. As Janet laid out evidence, duplicate invoices, the drone footage, the fire attempt, the courtroom shifted. Reporters leaned forward. Even the judge stopped writing. Vivian's pen tapped once, twice, then stilled. When the recess bell rang, Marcus stepped outside into the courtyard. Cameras swarmed. Do you think you'll win? Someone shouted. I already did, he said quietly. They had to listen. The next day, social media exploded with new rumors. Marcus assaulted an inspector. Marcus falsified evidence. None of it true. All of it loud. Sarah's phone buzzed nonstop. Emma deleted her accounts. Even Dorothy received anonymous calls that hung up when she answered. Lies spread faster than truth because lies don't wait for evidence. Janet called late that night. They are desperate, she said. Don't engage. We have discovery next week. Emails, bank statements. Once those land, the noise will stop. Marcus stared out the window at the dock ridge. Noise doesn't scare me anymore. Silence does. Discovery hit like a landslide. Vivian's accounting files revealed unauthorized transfers, millions in HOA funds funneled through shell companies. One name appeared again and again, County Commissioner Dale Hobart, Vivian's dinner guest. Lila Martins broke the story before the lawyers could bury it. Inside the Prestige web, county officials under investigation. The ridge that once gleamed with luxury now glowed with camera lights and search warrants. Vivian's phone never stopped ringing. That evening she sat alone in her marble kitchen, wine untouched, reading headlines she couldn't control. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. When a wall cracks, it doesn't fall in silence. It screams all the way down. While the world cheered the investigation, the Kellermans were still living behind concrete. The bridge remained closed. Appeals moved slower than justice. Bills piled up. Dorothy's health faltered again. One night, Sarah found Marcus sitting on the porch steps, head in his hands. We exposed them, she said gently. Why doesn't it feel like victory? Because we're still trapped, he whispered, and Mom's getting worse. He looked up at the sky. The stars haze behind valley mist. Truth doesn't fix roads, he said. It just shows who broke them. 2 days later, a messenger delivered a sealed envelope, Vivian's handwriting. Inside, a single page. Withdraw the lawsuit. Signed non-disclosure. Bridge reopened within 24 hours. Full compensation. Sarah stared at it. It's over, Marcus. We could have peace. He folded the paper slowly. Peace built on silence isn't peace. It's surrender. He set it on the table, lit a match, and watched the flames curl the signature into smoke. 3 months later, the judge read his decision. Vivian Ashworth and the HOA were found liable for fraud, harassment, and reckless endangerment. The bridge would be reopened under county supervision. Fines and restitution total millions. Marcus closed his eyes. The words didn't sound like victory. They sounded like air returning to lungs long deprived of it. Outside, reporters surrounded him. Lila Martins held out a microphone. Mr. Kellerman, any comment? He looked back toward the courthouse steps where Sarah and Emma waited. Tell them, he said softly, that a bridge is more than concrete. It's what keeps people human. That evening, he stood at the creek as workers removed the barricade. The last slab lifted away with a groan, revealing the old stones beneath, weathered but unbroken. Dorothy watched from the porch, tears glinting like rain. Letters, laws, threats. They thought paper could cage a man. But truth has its own handwriting, written in persistence, signed in courage. The wind carried the sound of running water under the bridge once more. For the first time in a year, the valley sounded alive. Marcus turned toward home, the faint hum of engines behind him. Not drones this time, but workers restoring what greed had tried to erase. "It's over," Sarah whispered. "No," he said, smiling faintly. "It's finally beginning." Dawn came gray and brittle, like a promise the valley no longer trusted. The bridge was open again, yet nobody dared cross it. Concrete dust still clung to the creek's banks. Workers had packed up their cranes and trucks, leaving silent behind. Only the soft rush of water filled the air, a sound the Kellermans had almost forgotten. Marcus stood in the middle of the restored bridge, boots damp with dew. He traced his fingers over the old stones his grandfather once set by hand. Beneath them, the current murmured against rock and memory. Sarah joined him, a thermos of coffee steaming in her hands. "Feels strange," she said. "Like visiting a grave that started breathing again," he replied. "Victory is never as loud as a fight that earns it. Sometimes it arrives quietly, unsure if it's even welcome." The trial was over. Vivian Ashworth was finished. Her accounts frozen, her board dissolved, her face splashed across every headline between Millbrook and the Capitol. The county had promised restitution, though no one could repay a year of fare. Marcus looked toward the ridge. The mansions gleamed under the pale sky, windows shut, lawns empty. No children played there anymore. Prestige Valley Estates had become a ghost neighborhood, beautiful, expensive, and silent. At home, Dorothy slept in the sunlight by the window. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Emma sat on the porch steps with her sketchbook, drawing the bridge she'd once feared she'd never see again. The pencil moved slow, deliberate, like she was rewriting memory. Inside, the phone kept ringing. Journalists, advocates, lawyers. Marcus ignored it. He wanted the sound of birds, not voices. 3 days after the verdict, a black sedan crept down the ridge road. Marcus saw the dust trail long before he saw the car. When it stopped near the bridge, he recognized a figure that stepped out, Vivian Ashworth. Gone were the tennis whites and diamond earrings. She wore a plain coat, hair pulled back tight. For the first time, she looked small. "You shouldn't be here," Marcus said. "I know. Reporters will love this." "Let them," she murmured. "I didn't come for them." She crossed the bridge slowly, every step echoing against stone. Sarah watched from the porch, hand hovering near her phone, unsure whether to call Janet or the sheriff. Vivian stopped a few feet away. Her eyes moved across the orchard, the repaired fences, the house that had survived everything she threw at it. "It's still beautiful," she whispered. Marcus said nothing. "They told me prison time's off the table if I cooperate," she continued. "But they want everything, emails, names, bank accounts. I came to tell you I'm giving it to them." "Why me?" "Because you're the only one who never wanted money from me." In that moment, two enemies stood on the same stone arch, one ruined by greed, the other scarred by justice. A gust of wind swept across the creek, scattering apple blossoms around them. Vivian caught one in her palm, stared at it, then let it fall. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm sorry." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Sorry doesn't build bridges," he said. "No," she replied, "but maybe it stops people from burning them." She turned, walked back to the car, and disappeared up the hill. The echo of her footsteps lingered long after the engine noise was gone. That night, rain fell soft over the valley. Marcus sat by the porch light repairing a tool handle, the smell of wet earth drifting in from the orchard. Peace felt heavier than war. It demanded rebuilding, not rage. Sarah brought him a blanket. You think she meant it. "Vivian!" "The apology. People mean things when they've lost everything," he said. "The trick is to mean them when they haven't." Inside, Dorothy stirred in her sleep and whispered something. Marcus leaned close enough to hear. "Your father would have been proud." The house, once filled with fear, began to sound like home again. Kettle whistles, floorboards, laughter that didn't end in silence. But even as calm returned, rumors swirled beyond the valley. Other homeowners associations across the state were under investigation. Journalists called the Kellerman case a precedent. Activists called Marcus a hero. He didn't like either word. He only liked the word farmer. The next morning, he woke before sunrise and walked to the orchard. The ground still held the scars of tire tracks and burn grass. He knelt, scooped a handful of soil, and let it run through his fingers. "We'll heal," he murmured. Behind him, the first light touched the bridge, turning the wet stone gold. The bridge was open, but the valley still held its breath. A week after Vivian's visit, strangers began to appear on the old county road, journalists, law students, local officials. They came to see the bridge, to walk across a symbol that had survived greed. Some left flowers. Others simply stood at the railing, listening to the water. Marcus watched from the porch, half uneasy, half grateful. Each new visitor reminded him that peace had witnesses now. Sarah brewed extra coffee for whoever stopped by. Emma guided children from nearby schools through the orchard, telling them how her grandfather built the bridge stone by stubborn stone. The story that had once isolated them now connected them. That's what real bridges do. They make strangers share ground. Still, not everyone came with good intentions. A silver SUV parked near the fence one evening. 2 men in suits stepped out, taking photos. When Marcus approached, they flashed county IDs. "Auditors," one said. "We're tracing the flow of HOA funds." "You're late," Marcus replied. They smiled thinly, already turning back to the car. Paperwork had outlasted outrage again. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a call from Janet. "Vivian testified today," she said, and she gave them everything: emails, receipts, the commissioner's offshore accounts. She's under witness protection now. Marcus exhaled slowly. The fight had ended far beyond his fence line. That night, he stood by the creek, the moon reflected in the calm water. For the first time, he felt the weight of forgiveness pressing against the need for vengeance. "She helped destroy us," Sarah said quietly behind him. "And helped expose them," he answered. "Both can be true." Spring returned early. The apple trees bloomed as if nothing had happened. White petals, green shoots, the smell of earth reclaiming itself. Marcus walked between the rows, checking irrigation lines he'd rebuilt himself. He paused by a stump. The tree burned during the arson attempt. Emma had placed a sapling beside it, its thin trunk tied to a stake with red ribbon. A small sign hung from the stick: "Start again." Healing never asked permission. It just grows where fear once stood. Neighbors from across the valley began helping. An old mechanic, a retired teacher, even a few residents from Prestige Valley who had quietly admired Marcus's fight. They repaired fences, painted barns, shared meals under lantern light. For the first time, laughter drifted up the ridge instead of down it. At the county fair that summer, Emma was invited to speak at a youth forum about resilience. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she looked out over the crowd. "My family used to think bridges were just concrete," she said. "Now I know their choices. You can close them out of fear or cross them out of hope." The applause rolled through the fairgrounds like a soft wave. Marcus stood at the back, hat in hand, eyes shining. Dorothy squeezed his arm. "You built her tougher than the bridge," she whispered. 2 months later, a letter arrived, postmarked from an undisclosed location. Vivian's handwriting was small but steady. "Mr. Kellerman, I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope the truth I've given back helps repair what I broke. If you ever walk the bridge at sunset, know that I'm doing the same, somewhere else, trying to find my own way across. Vivian Ashworth." Marcus read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it between the pages of his grandfather's old ledger. Some debts can't be paid with money, only with humility. He didn't tell anyone about the letter, but that evening he left a single apple blossom on the bridge railing. The creek carried it away. By autumn, the valley sounded normal again, tractors rumbling, dogs barking, wind moving through leaves. Sarah reopened her roadside stand. Locals returned for cider and pies. Tourists came too, curious, respectful, buying jars of bridge honey labeled with the family's name. The farmhouse got a new coat of paint, the porch swing new chains. Dorothy's health remained fragile, but she smiled more, humming songs from her youth. Marcus often woke before dawn, standing by the window just to make sure the bridge lights still glowed across the mist. They always did. Peace doesn't erase the past. It just teaches it to stop shouting. Autumn changed the valley slowly, as if even the seasons were cautious not to disturb its fragile peace. The air smelled of apples again. Not the sour scent of rut that had hung there last year, but sweetness, the kind that clings to your hands after picking. Trucks rumbled over the newly paved bridge, carrying crates to the co-op. For the first time since the blockade, the Kellerman's harvest filled every bin. Marcus drove the old tractor himself. Its engine coughed but held steady the same way he did. When he reached the market, people clapped. Someone shouted, "Welcome back, Marcus." He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so he just raised his hat and kept driving. After a storm, even ordinary sounds, an engine, a laugh, feel sacred. They remind you the world can still be kind. One afternoon, while Sarah soul-sided at the roadside stand, a man stopped by. He looked nervous, clutching a worn briefcase. "Name's Thomas Gray," he said. "I used to work for the county, under Commissioner Hobart." Sarah stiffened. Marcus joined her, wiping his hands on a rag. "I came to say thank you," the man said quietly. "I kept quiet when they started all this. Watching you fight, it reminded me what decency looks like." He opened his briefcase and handed Marcus a folder. Inside were photographs, letters, financial records, evidence of corruption beyond anything they'd known. "Give these to your lawyer," he said. "The investigation's bigger now. People are ready to talk." Then he got back in his truck and drove away without another word. Truth has gravity. Once it starts falling, it drags everything built on lies down with it. That night, Marcus delivered the folder to Janet. By morning, federal agents were back in Millbrook. Searchlights glowed on the ridge. Cameras rolled again. But this time, Marcus didn't feel fear, only closure. Winter came early. Frost silvered the orchard. The bridge lights flickered through fog. Dorothy's health faded with the season. She spent most days in her chair by the window, watching the creek. One night she called Marcus close. "Promise me something," she said. "When I'm gone, plant another tree. Right there by the bridge. Something that'll outlive all this." He nodded, unable to speak. She smiled faintly. "We build, they destroy, we build again. That's how the good survive." She passed quietly 2 weeks later, during the first snowfall. The funeral was small but full of warmth, neighbors, old friends, even 2 former HOA families who came to pay respects. After the service, Marcus carried a young apple sapling down to the creek and planted it beside the bridge. The soil was cold and hard, but his hands were steady. Some bridges are made of stone, others of roots and memory. In spring, invitations arrived from universities and community groups, panels, talks, documentaries. Lila Martins filmed the bridge that vanished premiered in the Capitol. Marcus and Sarah sat in the back row, uncomfortable under the lights, but proud of what the screen showed, a story no longer theirs alone. After the credits, people stood and clapped. Reporters swarmed. "Mr. Kellerman, what's next for you?" He smiled. "Farming. Always farming." That summer, the new sapling beside the bridge bloomed for the first time, tiny white flowers trembling in the breeze. Emma hung a small sign from its trunk, "Dorothy's Bridge." Visitors still came, but fewer now. Life was returning to normal, the kind of quiet that doesn't hide fear but peace. Marcus often crossed the bridge at dusk. Sometimes he stopped halfway, resting his hand on the stone rail. He'd look down at the water and see both reflections, the old farmer who had once felt powerless, and the man who'd learned that truth, like water, always finds a way through. They had crossed back, not just over a bridge, but into a life rebuilt from courage. And in the hush that followed victory, the valley finally remembered how to breathe. Summer slipped quietly into the valley. No protests, no sirens, no reporters. Just a hum of bees and the slow heartbeat of a place learning to live again. The county finally rebuilt the access road. The old private property signs were gone, replaced by wooden boards that read simply, "Welcome to Kellerman Bridge." Children biked across the stone arch every evening. Couples posed for photos at sunset. The valley, once divided by fear, had become a gathering place. At the farmer's market, Marcus sold honey, cider, and jars of apple butter with labels drawn by Emma. Sarah managed a store where the same steady gray sheet shone through the storm. "Funny," Marcus said one morning, arranging baskets. What's funny? People used to avoid us. Now they line up before dawn. Sarah smiled. Maybe people just needed to see the bridge before believing it. Sometimes victory isn't a parade. It's a morning where nothing goes wrong, where the air smells like fruit instead of fear. The ridge itself was nearly empty now. Vivian's mansion had been sold to a non-profit group restoring the land. They turned it into a wildlife center, its marble halls echoing with school field trips instead of board meetings. From his field, Marcus could still see its silhouette at sunset. He didn't feel anger anymore, only a kind of melancholy peace. Vivian was gone, but her shadow had taught them what light was worth. One evening, Janet Reeves visited, her briefcase finally replaced by a picnic basket. No lawsuits, no hearings, she joked. What do I even do with myself now? You rest, Marcus said. You've earned it. They sat on the porch as the sun sank behind the ridge. For once, their silence was easy. Some wars end not with surrender, but with stillness. Late that autumn, heavy rains returned. The creek swelled, roaring beneath the bridge. Marcus and Emma went to check the supports, just in case. Water foamed around the pillars, but held steady. It's strong, Emma said. Your grandfather built it right. So did you, Dad. They stood together under umbrellas, watching the current rush past. A single blossom from Dorothy's tree broke loose and floated downstream. Marcus followed it with his eyes until it disappeared. The river had seen everything: greed, fire, truth, forgiveness. But water never keeps grudges. It only keeps moving. By winter, the county announced a new annual event, Bridge Day. Locals and travelers gathered every year to celebrate unity and resilience. Marcus didn't want speeches, but they gave him one anyway. He stood at the microphone, hat in hand, voice rough from cold air. This bridge isn't mine, he said. It's ours. Built by hands, held by hope, tested by greed. But it's still standing because we didn't stop crossing. The crowd applauded. Children waved small paper bridges they'd made in school. From the back, Sarah wiped a tear. Janet clapped quietly beside her. That night, back at home, Marcus found a package in the mailbox. No return address. Inside was a framed photograph, Vivian standing beside the original bridge decades earlier, back when it was just concrete and sky. A note on the back read, "For the record, your family's courage reminded me who I used to be. V.A." Marcus set the photo on the mantel, beside Dorothy's portrait. He didn't forgive, not fully, but he understood. Some stories end in victory. The better ones end in understanding. Months later, spring returned. The apple trees shimmered with new blossoms, and Dorothy's tree by the bridge stood taller than Marcus himself. Emma painted a sign at its base, "Cross here for hope." As the sun set, the valley glowed gold. Sarah called everyone to dinner, neighbors, workers, friends. The porch filled with laughter, the kind that only grows where fear's been burned away. Marcus lingered by the bridge a moment longer. The sky reflected in the water below, blue fading to silver. He whispered quietly to the wind, not sure who he was speaking to, Dorothy, his father, maybe even Vivian. "We cross back," he said, "and we're still standing." The bridge no longer divided. It connected. Between past and future, guilt and grace, loss and life. And in that gentle dusk, the valley finally kept its promise. To stay whole, no matter who tried to break it again. They thought silence meant safety. It didn't. It only meant the next noise hadn't started yet. A year had passed since the verdict. The valley looked healed on the surface. Fresh paint on the fences, new blossoms on the trees, laughter spilling from the farmhouse porch. But under the hum of tractors and the steady rhythm of life, there was a faint new sound. A low, constant vibration that didn't belong. At first, Marcus thought it was thunder. Then one morning he followed it to the ridge. Engines, survey markers, men in reflective vests, and a sign hammered into the soil. County-approved development zone, Ridgeline Energy Partners. He stood staring at it, heart heavy. "Not again," he muttered. History doesn't repeat. It waits, then knocks in the same rhythm. That afternoon, 2 representatives from Ridgeline visited the Kellerman farm. They wore polished boots and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Mr. Kellerman, we're here to discuss community opportunities." One began. "The county's granting us rights to install turbines in a power substation on the ridge. We'd love to partner with local landowners." Marcus folded his arms. "You mean buy them?" "Well," the man chuckled, "partnerships come in many forms." They handed him a glossy brochure, pictures of wind turbines glinting in the sun, words like progress and innovation printed across the pages. Sarah joined them on the porch. "We've seen progress before," she said coldly. "It came with lawsuits and fire." The men exchanged glances, thanked them for their time, and left. That night, Marcus placed the brochure beside Dorothy's photo and sighed. She'd say the storm never leaves, it just changes its shape. A week later, Lila Martin showed up, camera in hand, same fire in her eyes. "You heard about Ridgeline?" she asked. "We saw their sign." "Then you'll want to see this." She pulled out her tablet, scrolling through leaked documents, emails between county officials and Ridgeline's executives. The same commissioner's office that had once funded Vivian's HOA now backed the energy deal. Corruption doesn't die, it evolves. When exposed to sunlight, it simply puts on cleaner clothes. Lila looked at Marcus. "They are planning to cut through the old forest reserve. You and 3 other farms stand in the way. They'll call it eminent domain." "Not again," Marcus said quietly. "Then we start early," she replied. "No more surprises." Rumors spread faster than wind through grass. Some locals welcomed the project. Jobs, revenue, modern progress. Others feared it would poison the land again. Meetings turned into shouting matches. Neighbors avoided eye contact at the market. Sarah watched the tension rise like smoke. "Feels like déjà vu," she whispered. "Feels like bait," Marcus answered. He refused to attend the county's community partnership event. But Emma went, representing her school's environmental club. When she returned, her face was pale. "Dad, they said the new substation will sit right behind the orchard." The room went silent. Peace built on paperwork can crumble with one stamp. Marcus picked up his coat. "Then we start fighting again." Janet Reeves came back to the valley. Her once carefree tone was sharper now. Experience had made her efficient, not cold. "They've learned from the Ashworth case," she said, spreading out blueprints. "They are hiding behind green energy policy. You fight them, they'll call you anti-progress." Marcus frowned. "I'm not against progress. I'm against theft with better branding." Janet smirked. "Good line. You'll need it." They formed a coalition. Farmers, teachers, a few county workers who still had spines. Lila filmed every meeting, every conversation. The movement was small, but determined. A storm can destroy, or it can clean the air. The valley had to decide which one this would be. Then came the strangest twist. Late one night, Janet called Marcus. "You might want to sit down," she said. "Why?" "Because Ridgeline's funding comes from a holding company called Ashworth Renewal Group." Marcus froze. "Vivian." "Her cousin, technically, but the same family money." The bridge lights flickered outside, as if reacting to the news. Some names refused to die. They just wait for the right wind to carry them back. Marcus looked out the window, toward the ridge glowing faintly in the distance. "Then we're not done crossing," he said softly. Progress came dressed in clean suits and green slogans. But underneath, it still smelled like greed. The county hall was packed. Farmers, business owners, reporters. At the front sat Ridgeline's executives, smiling beneath banners that read a greener future for Millbrook. Marcus stood near the back, arms folded. Janet whispered beside him, "Remember, let them talk first." The company's spokesperson clicked to the next slide, a shining mock-up of wind turbines along the ridge. "We're here to bring sustainable energy and new opportunities to this community," he said. "Clean power, local jobs, and a better tomorrow." Applause erupted from half the crowd. The other half stayed silent. Marcus stepped forward. "Question," he said. "What happens to the farms in your better tomorrow? Because that substation sits where my orchard does." The man hesitated. "We've offered fair compensation." "Fair to who?" Marcus cut in. You mean the same kind of fairness the last project offered? Lies, lawsuits, and fences. Silence can be powerful, but sometimes truth needs to raise its voice. The hole went still. Cameras clicked. Ridgeline spokesman forced a smile. Mr. Kellerman, our intentions are transparent. Then why do they come stamped with the Ashworth name? Gasps! Reporters scribbled. The spokesman's composure cracked. Marcus walked out before anyone could stop him. Behind him, whispers exploded like thunder. The next day, the phone started ringing again. Calls from lawyers, threats from anonymous numbers, even fake permits pinned to the Orchard gate. The noise had returned, louder than before. Sarah unplugged the landline. Emma deleted her social media. Janet doubled security on their files. That night, Marcus sat on the porch, hands trembling slightly as he sharpened the spade. "They won't scare us again," he muttered. "Fear is a sound you never forget. But courage, once heard, drowns it out." Lila uploaded a new video titled The Green Lie. It featured drone footage of the ridge, fresh cuts through the forest, unpermitted land clearing, and a leaked memo connecting Ridgeline to the same corrupt officials under federal watch. The video went viral overnight. Within 48 hours, major outlets picked up the story. For the first time, Ridgeline's clean reputation began to crack. But fame came with a price. Unknown cars started parking outside the farmhouse at night. Cameras flashed through the trees. Someone left a dead crow on the mailbox. Sarah confronted Marcus one morning. "You promised no more battles." "I promised not to run from them." Some wars don't knock twice. They move in and start calling themselves neighbors. The next town meeting was different. This time, Marcus didn't wait for permission. He stood before the crowd, voice steady but cold. "My family spent years fighting for this land. We faced drones, fire, and lies. And now, under a new name, they want it again. They'll call it energy, they'll call it progress, but it's still theft." He turned to the room of officials. "If you want my orchard, you'll have to cross that bridge again. And this time, it won't hold you." The hall erupted in shouts, supporters, opponents, cameras flashing. But this time, Marcus didn't flinch. Janet leaned in. "You just started a movement again." He exhaled. "Then let's move." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He walked to the creek, the moon glinting off the bridge. A strange envelope lay on the railing. No stamp, no name. Inside, a single USB drive. A note read, "You'll want to see this. VA." He hesitated, then took it to Janet the next morning. The files contained confidential Ridgeline documents, contract proving falsified environmental reports, signed by Vivian's cousin himself. "Where did you get this?" Janet asked. "It just appeared." Then someone wants redemption. Even ghosts can testify if they regret loudly enough. 2 nights later, smoke rose from the ridge. One of Ridgeline's drilling machines had caught fire. No casualties, but the damage was huge. By dawn, rumors flew. Sabotage, revenge, conspiracy. Reporters swarmed again. The valley felt trapped in a loop. Peace, corruption, fire, repeat. Sarah whispered, "It's happening all over." Marcus clenched his jaw. "Not this time. This time, we end it for good." The noise had returned to the valley, but beneath it, something else was rising, a reckoning that would decide who the land truly belonged to. The ridge burned through the night, painting the sky in orange scars. But the real fire wasn't in the forest. It was in the truth finally catching up to the lies. By morning, the smoke had cleared, leaving blackened machines and silence. The sheriff's trucks lined the access road. Ridgeline's men avoided eye contact. No one claimed responsibility, but everyone blamed Marcus. Cameras swarmed his property again, reporters shouting questions, drones buzzing overhead. "Did you set the fire, Mr. Kellerman? Was this revenge?" He said nothing. Janet faced the cameras instead. "My client doesn't burn bridges," she said sharply. "He builds them." Accusation is easy when the truth threatens profit. That afternoon, investigators arrived with a search warrant. They combed through the barn, the orchard, the old shed. They found nothing, but Marcus's hand still shook when they left. They are not after evidence, he told Sarah. "They're after exhaustion." The USB drive from Vivian sat untouched on Janet's desk. When she finally opened the encrypted folder, the air in her office went still. Inside were signed letters from Ridgeline's executives to the county commissioner, confirming the fire wasn't sabotage, but insurance fraud. They planned to destroy their own equipment to claim compensation and blame the opposition. Vivian's cousin had approved it. "She must have leaked this before disappearing," Janet said softly. "Why?" Marcus asked. "Because guilt doesn't always rot. It sometimes redeems." That night, Janet forwarded the files to federal investigators. By morning, headlines read, "Ridgeline fraud scandal explodes, Ashworth legacy under fire." Half the valley cheered. The other half accused Marcus of orchestrating everything for fame. Posters appeared on town walls. Kellerman equals chaos. Lila kept filming. Her latest piece, The Price of Peace, went viral again, showing the exhaustion in Marcus's eyes, the toll on his family, the cost of truth. "You become a symbol," she told him. "I didn't ask to be." Symbols don't get to choose. They just shine, or burn. Heroes are easy to praise when the war is over, harder to believe in when peace feels inconvenient. 2 weeks later, the county held an emergency hearing. Ridgeline executives were suspended. The project was terminated. The land, Marcus's orchard in the ridge, was declared environmentally protected territory. When the judge read the decision, there were no cheers this time, only relief. Marcus exhaled, feeling the weight of 5 years finally lift. Janet touched his shoulder. "You did it again." "No," he said quietly. "We survived it again." Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Marcus faced them. "Steady. This valley has been sold and saved too many times. Maybe now it can just be." And with that, the noise began to fade, not because the world grew quiet, but because the truth had grown louder. A month later, Marcus received another envelope. This time, no USB, just a photograph. It showed a small farmhouse by a coastline with a handwritten note. "I finally found somewhere to plant something real. V." He stared at it for a long time, unsure if he felt forgiveness or just peace. He placed the photo beside Dorothy's tree at the bridge, under a small stone. "Let her rest too," Sarah said softly. "She already is," he replied. Autumn came again. The valley glowed in gold and rust. Emma started college in the city, but came home every weekend. Lila's film was nominated for a national award. Janet finally retired. The Kellerman orchard thrived. The bridge lights were repaired with solar panels, the only kind of power the valley trusted now. One evening, Marcus stood alone on the bridge, sunset painting the water below. He closed his eyes and listened. No engines, no sirens, just the hum of bees, the whisper of wind through leaves, and the faint sound of running water. The noise had come and gone. But this time, the valley didn't bow. It endured. Because once a place learns the language of truth, lies can never speak loud enough again. Marcus turned toward home. Lanterns glowed on the porch, voices drifting from inside. Sarah laughing, Emma playing guitar. For the first time in years, his footsteps on the bridge didn't echo. They blended with the life around them. "We're home," he whispered. And this time, he meant it. The bridge stood, quiet and strong, not as a monument to survival, but as proof that peace, once built with courage, can stand against any noise the world sends next. Years passed. Seasons turned like slow, careful pages, and the valley, once scarred by greed and fire, learned how to remember without pain. The Kellerman Bridge had become more than stone and steel. It was a landmark. Tourists came to photograph it. Schools brought students to learn its history, and families picnicked beneath its shadow. Marcus still crossed it every morning, coffee in hand, boots damp with dew. He no longer checked for cracks or damage. The bridge had outlived the fear of breaking. Time has a way of softening the edges of even the hardest memories. What was once a battlefield now feels like home again. Sarah ran the orchard store, her hair silver now but her eyes just as fierce. Lila Martin's documentary, The Bridge That Fought Back, won international awards. Janet Reeve finally retired, but locals still called her the lawyer who made a town honest. Emma, now grown, taught environmental science at the city university. But every few weeks, she returned to the farm, standing at the same railing where her father once fought for their right to exist. "You ever get tired of it?" she asked one evening. "Tired of what?" "The bridge." Marcus smiled. "No, it's like breathing. You don't stop to think about it. You just keep doing it." One morning, a letter arrived, official, embossed, polite. The county wanted to rename the bridge, the Kellerman Memorial Crossing. Marcus frowned. "Memorial? I'm not dead yet." Sarah laughed. "They mean legacy." "Then let's wait until I actually leave one worth naming." Some honors feel too heavy for the living, especially for those who never fought for titles, only survival. But word spread fast. The town planned a celebration, the 20th anniversary of the bridge reopening. The mayor invited Marcus to speak, but he refused. "Let the next generation tell it," he said. So they asked Emma. The day of the event, the valley was alive again. Tents, music, laughter, camera crews. The bridge glittered under afternoon sunlight. Emma stood before the microphone, voice trembling at first, then steady. "This bridge was never about concrete or law. It was about connection. My family learned that progress without conscience isn't progress. It's destruction with better lighting. Today, we remember that courage doesn't live in courtrooms or contracts. It lives in people who refuse to stop crossing, no matter who tries to block the way." The crowd fell silent, then erupted in applause. Marcus stood at the back, hat over his heart. Dorothy's old ring hung from his neck, glinting in the light. In that moment, the valley didn't just remember a story. It remembered its own spine. Weeks later, the rain came again. Heavy, endless. The creek swelled until it growled beneath the bridge. For a moment, the valley feared history was repeating itself. Marcus, now older but still strong, pulled on his raincoat and went out in the downpour. He stood on the bridge, water crashing below, thunder echoing across the ridge. But this time, the stones didn't tremble. They held. Sarah joined him, umbrella barely holding. "You're going to catch your death," she said. "Then I'll die seeing what we built survive." Nature tested them one last time. But the bridge stood firm, not because it was flawless, but because it had been rebuilt with hands that understood loss. When the rain cleared, a double rainbow arched across the valley. Even the air seemed to smile. Years later, when Marcus's steps grew slower and his voice quieter, Emma took over the orchard. She didn't change much, just added a sign by the roadside. "Truth grown here." When Marcus finally passed, the town gathered by the bridge at sunset. No speeches, no monuments, just silence, broken by the sound of the creek he'd saved twice. Sarah placed his old hat on the railing. Emma whispered, "He's not gone. He's part of the bridge now." And maybe she was right, because every sound that crossed the water, wind, footsteps, laughter, carried a trace of him. 10 years later, Emma brought her own daughter to the bridge. The child ran across it barefoot, fearless. "Grandpa built this?" she asked. "He rebuilt it," Emma said. "Twice." "Why?" "Because people forgot how to listen to each other." The little girl nodded, tracing her fingers over the warm stone. "I'll remember," she said simply. And the valley did remember, not through statues or ceremonies, but through every family that crossed that bridge without fear, through orchards that kept blooming, and rivers that refused to stay silent. As dusk fell, Emma stood on the same spot her father once had. The air smelled of rain and apple blossoms. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed, low, steady, unhurried. "Rest easy, Dad," she whispered. "The valley's in good hands now." In the end, peace didn't come from winning. It came from remembering what was lost, what was fought for, and what must never be forgotten again. Because some bridges aren't built to cross water. They are built to carry time.